Welcome back to another video, guys. So what I've got for you today, if you watch what's happening here, it's sort of a background switcher effect. So you'll notice when I hover on each of these four columns, we get a new background image that sort of fades in and zooms in slightly. But key to this effect is the background image spans the full width of the main container. So it spans all four columns. So that's what makes this effect quite unique. On top of that, I've added a sort of blur effect to each column on hover. We've also got a bit of text that slides in upwards with a CTA. And I've added a sort of semi-transparent background to this to make sure the text pops that little bit more. So I have made this fully responsive as well. So if I inspect this, you'll see as I shrink the page down to a sort of small laptop and tablet size, the containers all stack on top of each other now, or rather the top two stack on top of the bottom two, but the effect still remains where on hover, the background image spans the entire height and width of the parent container. And then on mobile, I've got all four of them stacking on top of each other. So you can now see all the background images for each container, but you'll still get the text sliding on it upwards with the button as well. So I'll show you how I've created this today because it's quite simple. It's surprisingly simple how I've built this, and it's just in Elementor. There's no additional plugins, no extra widgets, just a little bit of containers, images, and some custom code. So I think you'll like this one. So let's get into it. So I'll start by showing you how I've set up the main parent container. So this is the main parent container here. And what I've done is I've set mine to full width at 85% because I think this effect works well with quite a wide sort of section because it's quite a striking effect and you want your images to be quite large. So for me, that's 85% at full width, but you can, if you wanted to contain it within a box width, you can just select box and it'll still work. So I've set my minimum height to 700 to give it this height. I've also set the direction to row. The gaps I've set to 0 because we don't want any gaps between our images. We just want the thin 1 pixel border, which I'll show you how to set up. But for now, just keep gaps as 0 and then wrap set up to wrap so that on smaller screen sizes, we can get them stacking on top of each other. So there's nothing within style that we need to do. It's just in advanced. I've given mine some top and bottom margin, and then I've set left and right to auto to keep it centered. Now, I haven't added padding because I'll show you what happens if you add some padding. So this is my pre-built one here. And if I added some padding to the top and bottom, I'll just add 100 to the top. You'll notice what happens here is the image spills into the padding because the images are absolute positioned. So avoid using padding. Use margin if you can. And if you can't use margin, use padding on the other containers that are going to be above and below this container on your website. Alternatively, if you can't do that, you can just put this container within another nested container. So this one inside another one. I'd avoid that if you can because you want to avoid nested divs. So for me, I've just added margin top and bottom. Now I can add the first box or column. So to do that, I'll just add an element, stick a container in here. So this will be our first column in our main parent container. So we want this set to full width. And the width, because there's 4 of them, we'll set this to 25%. So it's a quarter of the entire width. So we'll leave min height for now. And we'll set the justify content to end. And we'll set gaps to 0. So that's everything we need to do in the layout. In style, we want each of these containers to have a border. And the border needs to be solid. And we only want 1 pixel on the right hand side. And then the color for this, I've got a light border color here. So you'll see, I'll click on it so you can see what it is. RGBA, it's white with 0.4 opacity. So that's the color I've set for the borders. And then if we go into advanced, all we need to do in here is give it a Z index of 1 and a CSS class. This is important, of background hyphen box. So that's everything you need to do for the first box. And I'll just publish this now to save it. And the way I'll do this is I'll just do 1 and I'll just duplicate it 3 more times and then I'll edit the duplications. But this is the first box complete. So I'm just going to rename this to box 1 to keep the structure clear. So box 1. Now, the first thing to do now is add the heading in here, because you'll see within each box, we have a heading and then we have a text editor and a button. So starting with the heading, I'll go into here and then add the heading widget. So heading, and I'll just paste in my heading, immerse yourself in sound. We'll make it a global typography and I'll make it white as well. So that's just a global color I've got set up. Within advanced, I want padding on every side except the bottom. So I'm going to add 1.5 rem to every side except the bottom side. So I'll unlink that now and delete that. And then the last thing we need to do with this header is just give it a class of box-title. So now that's the header done, we can move on to the next bit, which is the content within here, which is a text editor and a button, and that's contained within a separate container. So I'll show you how to do that now. So let's add another container now, and I'll call this one content1. Again, just so we don't get a bit lost in the structure. And I'll just rename heading as well, heading1. So within this container, the content, what we want to do here is make sure it's on full width, set it to row and wrap, and then we don't need to do anything in style. We just need to add some padding in advanced. So we'll add 1.5 rem on every side except the bottom, except the top. So we'll get rid of 1.5 rem from the top and leave it on all the other sides. And then the last thing to do here is just add a class of content box. So this is important, again, to make sure your classes are exactly the same as what I'm typing in here to get this working. So that's the content box done. And then within here, we have a text editor. So I'll just add my text editor and I'll paste in my text. Now I've got this set as a global font of background content body and a global color of white with 8 paragraph spacing. And then within advanced, all you need to do is add padding top of 20 just to give it that gap. That's the text editor done. And then just add a button to finish off. So my button, I'll just type get yours now for my text. And then within style, I'll just make sure this is purple. So our first image, we don't want the image within box 1 because the images are spanning all 4 of the boxes. So it needs to be within the main parent container. So add an image here. So I'll just click image and you can see it's underneath box 1 at the moment, which is where we want it. I'll just rename it image 1 and I'll show you how to set this up now. So I want my headphones as the first image. I'll set this to full. And then within style, we just need to set the width here, 100, and the height of 100% as well. And then object fit, I'll put cover, and then I want it to be center. So whatever images you're using, make sure they work well, and generally the main focal point of the image is in the center. So that's the style tab done. And then within advanced, what we want to do is make sure again, the width here is set to full width. We want the position set to absolute and then leave these as 0. So 0, 0 for the horizontal and vertical orientation in the top left. Set the Z index to 0 to make sure they sit underneath the columns. And then after that, we just need to give a class to the image of bg-image. And then once we've done that, we can save by publishing. So now that's saved, I'll go through some responsivity settings I've set up. Now, this is where you might want to add a bit of your own customization because you might want your containers to stack at a different breakpoint, or you might want some slightly different heights. But for me, this is what works well. So within my main box 1, on laptops, I wanted mine to stack. So this is where we then put 50% width. And for my minimum height, I put half of the main parent container's height, which is 700. So for me, it's 350. And now if we go and inspect this, what that means is it'll stack correctly when we hit the laptop breakpoint. So this is the laptop breakpoint and we're now stacking. What I did notice is on mobile landscape, we do get a bit thin. So I added a little bit more height here just to make sure on hover my text will still fit in the containers. So going back to the edit page on mobile landscape, I upped 350 to 400 just to give 50 extra pixels to make sure the text fits. So that's all I've done for the main box. And then within heading, the only change I've made is on mobile, I've changed the padding to 1 rem from 1.5. So bottom is still 0, but the others are 1 rem. And then finally on the main content box, again, this is just on mobile, I've changed it from 1.5 rem to 1 rem on every side except the bottom. I've left the bottom as 1.25 to give it a little bit extra space. But that's everything I've done for responsivity. The only thing left to do responsivity wise for tweaking is the borders on the boxes. But because these vary per box, we'll do this at the end. Now that's done, I'll copy in my custom CSS into the main parent container here within advanced into custom CSS. I'll include this link to the code pen in the video description, but this is my CSS here. So I'll select it all and copy and paste it in to this custom CSS box. Now you'll see your main image disappear. So that's what's meant to happen at the moment. So now that's in, I'll just publish that. And the next thing we can do is just duplicate all the boxes, or sorry, the box, duplicate box 1 and image 1 3 more times and just edit the content. So by content, I mean the heading and the text editor and your button. Edit those 3 things to say what you want for each box, and then also change the image, the background image, to whatever your next 3 images will be. So I'll just speed through that now. So once you've done that, guys, you should end up with something like this. So we've got our main container with our 4 boxes in, and I've just renamed them all for clarity, and they've all got individualized content within them now. And on top of that, you've got your 4 images in, and there's 4 unique images now associated with each box, but not within each box, the siblings of each box. So once we've done that, I'll just finish off with a few responsivity settings. So I mentioned earlier about borders. Because you've duplicated these boxes, box 4 will have a border on the right. So if I click onto box 4 and then go into style, we can just set this border to none because we don't need a border on the right hand side. So now there's no border here. And then on laptops, because this is square, what we want to do is go in and make sure we've got the correct borders set up for when this is a square structure. So we'll first go into box 1, and then the style on this box, we want to go into border, and then we want the border to remain on the right, but we also want a border on the bottom. And then on box 2, we just want a border on the bottom. We don't need a border on the right anymore. So I'll unlink these and I'll just put the border on the bottom. Box 3 is fine because it's just got the border on the right, and box 4 doesn't have a border. So all these are now set up correctly until we get to mobile. We want to turn all these borders off. So we'll just turn them to 0 for every single box. And that's because we don't need a border on mobile because they all just sit on top of one another. So I'll just turn them all off or turn them on to 0. So once that's done, that's all your borders set and complete for every screen size. And now we can just add our JavaScript. So to do that, I'll just go back to desktop view, go into your main container and add a new HTML widget. So once we've added that widget, it should just sit at the bottom of your container, and then go into the code snippet, code pen, sorry. And again, I'll include this in the video description and just copy in the script here. Now, all this is doing is on hover of your images, or rather on hover of your columns, it's just adding an active class to the image associated with it. So that's all it's doing. It's really lightweight code, this. So you can just see how it works here. It adds the active class and it removes it from the previous image. So once we've added that, we can now publish our background switcher and then view it, and we'll see it fully functioning here. The only thing left to do is we need to make some tweaks on the background images for mobile, because it's all working correctly all the way down to mobile. We can see tablet working correctly, desktop we're fine, but on mobile, because all our images are positioned absolute in the top left, all the images will just stay in the top left here with this one stacked on top, so we can't see our images further down on the other boxes. So to address that, we'll go back into our edit page. On box 1, image 1, we don't need to make any changes, but on image 2, within advanced, where we can see it's positioned absolute, we just need to change the top vertical orientation, the top offset, sorry, to 400 pixel. And this is because on mobile, I'll make sure this is on mobile and not on desktop, but this is because on mobile, we know that each of these boxes here, so if I click on box 2, on layout, the minimum height is 400 pixels. So because we know the 400 pixels high, that means image 2 needs to be 400 pixels offset from the top. And then similarly with image 3, this is another 400 pixels on top of that. Again, this is just for mobile, so we need to offset that 800 pixel, and you'll see this starting to take shape now. And then the last one, another 400 pixel on top of that, 1200 pixel offset on the vertical orientation. So there we go. That's it set up now fully on mobile. So I'll publish this now, and now I'll talk you through some key points in the custom CSS of the main parent container. So the first one is related to whether you chose to use a content width of full width or boxed. If you used boxed, so if your content width is set to boxed within your custom CSS, you'll see this first one here that's commented out says boxed width setup if required. So just uncomment this if you're using a boxed width. And what that means is it'll make your images work correctly and not spill into the outside parameters of your container. So I'm using a full width container, so I can keep that commented out. So the next one is basically you can just tweak these to suit your sort of design, because a lot of these are based on transition duration times. So if you want it all to be a little bit snappier, you can just change your 1000 milliseconds. I've got the text coming up in here at 1.5 seconds. So you can make that snappier if you want. You can just have a play around with it. The same with the color as well. My color's set here, 0, 0, 0. So black, 35% opacity. You can make it darker or lighter or remove it if you want. So just experiment and have a play around with the code. If you like it, you can just leave it as is. But there's only two main key items here related to functionality that could break it if they're not set correctly. The first one is this one here. So right at the top in capital letters, I've put match with your mobile box heights for this height here of the background image. So if you remember, my boxes on mobile, I've set to 400 pixel. So what you need to do is make sure whatever you've set on mobile for your boxes, make sure it's matched here. Now this one here at the bottom in capital letters again says change to close to your content box max heights. So for me, that's 310 pixel. And this is set up like this because we can't animate a height of 0 to a height of auto. Because we can't do that in CSS, a workaround is to use max height. The problem is, if you set a max height that's way too high, when you take your mouse away, this will remain open for a while the max height decreases back down to 0. So we want the max height to be as close as possible to the actual height that it is naturally. So the way to figure that out is if you go into your page and preview it, you want to find when your containers, when your boxes are at their thinnest. So this might be while they're still on desktop, or it might be while you're on a sort of mobile portrait view or landscape, sorry. So for me, it's on desktop here. This is when they're at the thinnest, just before they go to laptop size. And then what you need to do is find the content box with the most content in it, because this one will be your tallest. So for me, it's this one. So if I just click on this box here and then set up a hover, what that'll do is it'll open it up, and now I can click on my content box and see how tall it is, because this is the tallest content box at its tallest point. So if I click on this now, you can see there it says 286 by 307. And another way to see this is if you do click on it and then go into computed, you'll see down here there's a height, and that's 307. So this is why in my custom CSS, I've set this to 310. So I've just rounded it up basically to the nearest 10. But that's what the note means. Change to close to your content box max height. So it's just the maximum height of your longest content box at its thinnest point. So I hope that makes sense, guys. But that's just the only two sort of functional requirements you need to change. If you do, maybe it'll work perfectly first time, hopefully. But yeah, if you need to change some bits, they're the two bits you'll want to change functionally. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, guys. I think it's a pretty cool effect. I did see it on another website, but I've put my own spin on it because I've added sort of a background overlay. I've made it a bit smoother. I've made it more responsive. And yeah, if you do enjoy it, if you have enjoyed it, feel free to give it a like, comment, or subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next one.